Now we're through the looking glass here, people. White is black, and black is white. You don't believe me?
I don't know.
All this time, you never believed me.
I just want to raise our children and live a normal life. I want my life back.
Look, this thing's bigger than all of us.
Now, how many courts is it gonna take for you lawyers to figure out what you want?
People got to know. People got to know why he was killed.
Do you know what you've done to me? I'm a dead man!
Well, if they can kill the president, they can certainly get me.
You're a mouse fighting a gorilla.
You're close. You're closer than you think.
There's going to be an attempt to kill you somewhere between here and New Orleans.
I say let justice be done or the heavens fall.
Hello, I'm Thomas Carruthers.
And I'm David Whiting.
David, years ago, I penciled in JFK. This was when we lived at Etfield Grove.
Ah, yeah. Oh,
and
wow.
It never came to, it never came to fruition for a litany of reasons. However,
all of them government related.
Oh, governmental. Somebody tried to stab us. I am endlessly fascinated by the JFK assassination. And I am, for my sins, a very big Oliver Stone fan. And over the years, obviously now we've just celebrated, it's not the term, we've just had the 60th anniversary of the assassination. And as whenever any anniversary of the actual event occurs, cycles and cycles and cycles about the Oliver Stone 1991 film JFK come to pass again. And I don't know, it was percolating because this is a film that I greatly, greatly admire, enjoy, and I think gets a bad rap. But I also think, on the other hand, that it remains one of the most provocative, controversial movies of all time.
Yeah.
As time passes, I think it's controversial in new ways. And I want to, so let's jump the gun here. I read the full JFK. So when JFK came out, everybody hated Oliver Stone. Not everybody, but there was a huge contingent. And so he released this book, the documented screenplay, which is him and Zachary Sklar, literally. So you'll get here. My God, bullseye, how do we know he was there? Because this office address was stamped on the pro-Castro leaflets he was handing out in the summer of '63. And then it'll say, Oswald actually worked by himself on Canal Street. It has full facts and it will say for every single detail, this is true. This is kind of not true. It was actually here and there. This is actually two different people as a composite. However, this is actually true. And then this is what I think is brave. Brave is a strong word. That the screenplay takes you up to there, which is about the third way in. The rest of the book is all of the hit pieces against the film.
Yes.
And all of the hit pieces against the film with Stone's responses and all of the good reviews and all of the bad reviews. I don't want to make this about, the certain political world we live in right now. But that's just not the world we live in, everybody makes out like Stone is this megalomaniacal psychopath who used 40 million of a studio's budget to make his QAnon movie. And I think as time passes, there's a quite a tragic quote in here where he's like, this movie isn't, I think a lot of elderly white men will have a problem with my movie. This movie is for the future generations. And I think on the opposite, on the other side, I think future generations look, ironically, at Oliver Stone like a kooky old white man. But to have the balls to just, in your screenplay, he could have just printed the screenplay with all of the, well, actually, I was right about this, but he didn't. He printed everything else. Now, he does print it and then have his own responses as well. But but it's more than a lot of people would do. David, what is your relationship with
The
JFK, the JFK assassination, JFK 1991, and I guess Oliver Stone in general? Have you watched any other Oliver Stone movies?
So prior to this, I mean, my relationship to the JFK assassination is I didn't catch it at the time. I was doing other things. However, as far as this movie and Oliver Stone, I had heard of neither until I watched this movie. I did a brief little check-in on like Oliver Stone. I would say he looks exactly like I would expect a kooky old white man to look. But you know, always nice to see another veteran filmmaker out there.
We go. I think this is the big point. This is the big point. He wins both of his. He wins 2 Best Director Oscars for Platoon, which is a movie all about, you know, it's quite bold to just say the Vietnam War being terrible, but like he makes that and Born on the 4th of July, which is the Ron Kovic veteran story and how we negated our veteran. I see this all on a cycle. Platoon, war on the ground is abysmal and horrid, specifically Vietnam, which is obviously his experience.
Yes.
Born on the 4th of July, coming home and the veteran experience is equally awful. And this is what we do to veterans who speak up, specifically at the time. And then we go all the way back to the very start with JFK. How was this allowed to be? And it kind of feels like someone in a little bit. I don't think he's in denial, because I'll just play my cards. I do think it was a governmental conspiracy, but like it feels like a man in denial of, I can't have lost, you know, I can't have lost those years of my life. Yeah, I can't have lost my innocence for nothing. It had to have been something bigger, surely. I read the I think, was it called Chasing the Light? I can't remember. Anyway, he did a biography the other day, 2 years ago. And I read it, and it stops. It's kind of it's very good, but it's up until he wins the Oscar for Platoon. So it's kind of a lot like, and I've also been reading Barbara Streisand's autobiography, which is mainly just, they said I shouldn't have put my face on a front cover and not have anything else. I was right. It was the biggest selling album of all time. Like every single chapter has that arc. But
everyone said I was a fool, and now you're reading my autobiography, motherfuckers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you just spent 1,000 pages. The Barbara is 1,000 pages, and I'm insane. That's another thing. And the Chasing the Light ends with him winning the Oscar for Platoon, and he talks very candidly about the fact that he was a man of privilege, and that he was like he managed to get out, and he was very privileged with his rich father. And that was not the experience that he saw time and time again with who was being sent to Vietnam. And I think there is a guilt there. And again, I'm reading this and watching all the stuff. I just have this incredibly, maybe I'm stupid, I just have this incredibly sincere image of Oliver Stone. And I know that is not the commonly held opinion. Like, let's look at his other movies. Nixon, which is very good, actually. Anthony Hopkins doesn't look at all like Richard Nixon, but it's one of his best performances, so it's kind of weird. W, which is basically this, but all about George W. Bush. And like, yeah, no, well, there's Richard Dreyfuss in as Dick Cheney. It's an interesting movie. Snowden, like he is always on the forefront of these, you know, societally, you know, villains in many cases, and looking at all sides of it. And, you know, we go back to Platoon, and which was one of the major first sort of war negative. Well, no, that's a blatant lie. Deer Hunter was 70. Deer
It was
Hunter was
arguably one of the
74.
most effective anti-Vietnam War movies. Although I am of the opinion that there is no such thing as an anti-war movie.
Yeah.
As hard as one tries, but I do think Platoon does a very good job of that.
Yeah. I think it's you could make I think you could make the argument for Deer Hunter because so very little of it is spent actually at war, which is kind of a cheat. Well, it's not a cheat at all. I'm not negating. Well, it's not a true story, but anyway. But like, you don't. There's very little actual. There is no. I'm trying to remember. There is no like battleground in Deer Hunter because the majority of the quote unquote Vietnam sequence is the infamous Dee Mao, the Russian roulette. And that like 10 minutes and them being trapped as on that riverside. Anyway, we're talking about the Deer Hunter again.
Anyway, JFK. Well, I will say, for someone who's so very critical of the establishment, one might say, it's almost not surprising to hear that he's kind of got this public image that one might say is intentionally doctored to be quite cartoonish and doddering. Or just don't listen to this kooky old man, everyone. His movies are fun, but ultimately pointless sort of exercises.
I have a counteract in the sense of, have you ever watched the movie Dave with Kevin Kline?
No.
Very fun 90s comedy where he looks exactly like the president and he's used as a double to get the president out of a hotel in time because he's got a mistress. Anyway, it's a really funny movie. And anyway, the real president has a heart attack while sleeping with his aide. And so Dave has to become the president. Really funny, wonderful movie. Halfway through that movie, Oliver Stone has a cameo as himself being interviewed by Larry King. And he says, if you look at the two pictures of the two presidents, he is definite. There is a change around March of last year. And that is like the big thing of like, he knows that he's a little bit kooky. He knows, and he's willing to make that self-defacing joke. But on the other hand, 30 years later, his last big project was another 4-hour JFK documentary. So, he, for as much as he is self-defacing, this is still his native wound. And this is also a movie that, come 1992, leads, well, let's just mention this now, leads to the, I've had to read this over and over again, so I know what this is.
Some sort of legislation regarding, like, assassination reports.
The Assassinations Review Board, the ARB, which they released a certain amount of the records, because obviously this movie ends with, you will, and it's Jim Garrison's big point. I'm going to be telling my son to read, stay happy, and stay healthy, so that he can one day,
bright September morning,
walk to the book, walk to Texas Review Board. I'm really working on my Costa. I hope you're.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And, do not forget your fallen king. Anyway, that's.
I recognized some of the RA and John Candy's character there, Dean Andrews. I was like, so here's Tom in this movie.
Yo, you get that? Yeah, yo, he's about as clear as that crab.
You dig me, Daddy-o?
Every single right. I want to talk this. These are something like let's just throw these quotes out now because I feel like they're kind of all encompassing. So it's a 40 million budget. It makes $205 million, and you could make the argument that this sort of movie could never get made now, and it would never make any money. However, we just watched
Oppenheimer,
a three-hour black and white and color conspiratorial movie filled with actors doing small scenes, filled with nothing but exposition. I know that you're
all
kind
about
of a
kooky old white man.
When they learn about Los Alamos, they will find the horror. Anyway, X. But that's the real question, isn't it? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public. Oswald, Ruby, Cuba, the map keeps them guessing like some kind of parlor game, prevents them asking the most important question. Why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? And who has the power to cover it up? Who? Which leads me to my first point. Two lead points. Is the fact that this movie, I don't know how to phrase this. Right. So this movie is about the Jim Garrison case, which is still the only case that's ever been brought against any sort of conspirator or any sort of, this is the only case that's ever been brought to bear in the JFK assassination. And it's an ideal thing, plotline, narrative for Stone to use to make this a real quote unquote film and pin secretly and hide them all in there everything else that we've learned since and everything else, whether Garrison actually found it out or not. And in the middle of it, you've got a slight alteration of the Garrison character in that he was quite a bad lawyer, allegedly, and his case was a total calamity. And instead, you put in there Kevin Costner as a sort of Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington,
he was
Gregory Peck.
I kept thinking, of To Kill a Mockingbird sort of character.
The final "It's up to you" is a hair's
directly
breadth.
Into the eyes of the camera. It's up to you.
It's up to
Audience
you.
members sitting in your underwear at 2 a.m. Get out there and stop the government.
JFK 1991, man. And it's a hair's breadth between that and "It's your duty." It's it's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And
I do wonder. It makes me want to go look up the transcript of the actual trial to see. If he was truly so. If Mr. Garrison was truly so eloquent in his closing remarks.
So the closing remarks are a conflation of other things that Garrison has said throughout the years in interviews past and since, all conflated rather eloquently into this summating argument. And I mean, we'll get to it, but like the trial, we get the brief 5 minutes that's like all the witnesses and like, well, he's gay, he's not a real, he's in prison, he lied to you. Okay, you're a heroin addict. And we get that. And it's like, okay, so this was all the stuff that actually happened in the trial. Okay, now let's spend 30 minutes on back and to the left, back and to the left, back and to the left. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on Oswald.
I have to say, that's the most number of times I've watched the Kennedy assassination, like the truly visceral moment of the Kennedy assassination over and over and over again. Was this movie.
Yeah, but David, the year is 2024. You have seen that footage before.
I have seen that footage before. I haven't seen his actual brains being blown out. In school, we were always shown the moment he clutches at his throat and then sort of leans to the side, and then it would always basically cut to him being slumped over, as opposed to us seeing his actual brain explode out the side of his head.
The thing is, though, this was 1991, and to my knowledge, to my knowledge, it had been previously shown once on the Geraldo Rivera show when he was basically a whistleblower because the Abraham Zapruder and then his son got it or something. Anyway, and it was owned by Time Life technically because he sold the image, and so basically he was a whistleblower, went on the Geraldo Rivera show, and Geraldo Rivera said, "Don't watch this if you're squeamish. This is like, we're going to actually show you what happened." And they see it on a fuzzy television once in 1980, whatever. Oliver Stone puts it zoomed in on a huge movie screen in 1991. I can't even imagine.
I don't think I counted the number of times that shot was shown, but I'm pretty sure it's got to be at least 10 plus times he shows that specific 3 seconds or so.
Well, it's the only a picture speaks more than it's the only, but also above all else, it's the one thing that you can't argue with, and you could completely rebut this movie. You can say whatever you feel, but back and to the left, forget about everything else. Forget about everything else. And to be honest, all the Clay Shaw stuff is preposterous. and is just a means for Stone and Garrison to get to the JFK
The core
stuff.
of the conspiracy, yeah.
Back and to the left is unrefutable. Is unrefutable. Like that is it. And that is why Stone shows it. You know, back into that is it. Whether it was a crossfire.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, there was definitely a conspiracy. I will say it.
Yeah.
And I think the thing a lot of people don't know is that only 20 some years prior to this, there was actually an entirely different conspiracy prior to not 20 years prior, so just prior to World War II, uncovered by a rather notable Marine Corps figure named Smedley Butler, who was appointed as sort of a special investigator on behalf of the U.S. government, uncovered a conspiracy by a number of major leaders of U.S. business and military industrialists to essentially kill and replace the president with a fascist sympathizing strongman that they could manipulate and essentially ally themselves with Nazi Germany. This was uncovered at the time by this general and revealed as a thing. And the president at the time, FDR, was unable to really prosecute or do anything about it because all of these men majorly ran the U.S. economy right prior to World War II, and then World War II happened. So I think entirely plausible. You know, we had multiple presidents speaking about the dangers of the military-industrial complex and its growing influence over politics and society. JFK died, and you've never once heard a president ever speak so strongly against such things again. And somehow America seems to always be caught up in these forever wars that are strikingly similar to Vietnam.
But this is the thing: things change. Well, nothing changes and things change. 1963, the idea of a trustworthy government is believable.
Mm-hmm.
What happened since 63? The entire Vietnam War, which by the end of it, even the general public answers the question, the famous poll, I think it was 70% of they don't know why we're actually in Vietnam. And then bigger than that, the thing that blew everything open and was revealed to be true and was Watergate. And that was the thing of, this is major news that hasn't been hidden. Everybody knows now that government was bullshit and was lying and covered things up. Now, was it just Nixon's government, or is this a systematic thing? Which leads us to be primed for 1991 for a more suspecting and more openly minded audience to view Stone's movie. Your problem is that he's following the narrative arc of the real Jim Garrison, who
was not nearly as credible as he's held out to be in the film.
and was basically maybe I'm naive. I believe that Garrison was forced into a corner of pinning it on Clay Shaw. And I think if he had a little bit more time, then that wouldn't be the thing. I don't think that he believes that there was a major anti-communist gay underworld that led the
trial was absolutely doomed from the start, because ultimately he was trying to prove that oh my goodness, Clay Shaw was complicit in this overarching conspiracy. But I mean, he spent a lot of the time talking about the magic bullet and how the events played out on the day, none of which Shaw actually was physically present for or had anything to actually do with the pulling off of. So, I mean, the trial was doomed from the start. Ultimately, in the court, if we're trying to determine if you've proved that this man is guilty of being involved in a conspiracy, you haven't. You've shown us that most likely there is one, that there's a lot of convenient evidence that would point to there being a conspiracy. But in terms of proving that this man was a part of it, you've totally failed to do that, which is a shame.
we go back, it's once we get what we all knew was gonna, we find Clay Shaw not guilty on all counts, and then we get the one guy who's the jury foreman, and he says, we believe there was a conspiracy, but whether Clay Shaw was a part of it is another kettle of fish. And again, that is an actual quote from a jury foreman, and that's the whole film. And whether you could look at Garrison. There is a whole other film that isn't actually obsessed with the assassination, where you could paint Garrison as a bit of a tragic, complex figure. That is not this movie. And Stone, for narrative purposes, and to make this a viewable thriller and film, has to make Garrison the shining knight on the hill. He has to make him, Mr. Smith. He has to make him Atticus Finch.
Well, that was the thing. I thought, throwing aside like historical like accuracy on the character at this point, I did think it was very interesting because at first I did not like Kevin Costner's performance as the movie opened. It was something about just that first, oh no.
I've got it. No, I've got it in my What's the Change. It's so bizarre. I've thought this for years, David. You have no idea. As a small child, excuse me, boss. Excuse me, boss. The president's been shot. Oh no, is it bad? They got him in the head.
No, how bad?
Yeah, it got him in the head. Oh God.
And
however, I do think
just another quick aside, Joe Pesci's New Orleans accent. Something else.
I'm kind of all in on Joe Pesci as David Ferry. I'll be honest. This is where the entertainment value comes in. This obviously this is an incredibly terrible thing. It's one of the most entertaining movies ever made. I love every single performance. David Ferry, because when you first meet David Ferry, they don't talk about the alopecia straight away. So you just think, is this the worst wig ever put on a motion picture?
Did they just not realize that Joe Pesci looks fucking ridiculous right now?
Man, they try to take off his beard. He's just absolutely insane. This was the funniest quote I found in the book. Was an interview where someone was talking about David Ferry, and one of the researchers said, to be fair to Stone, his depiction of David Ferry is, if anything, not as over the top as it should have been.
Not crazy enough.
It's like, let's see that movie.
Who was this guy?
He was curing rats to cure cancer. So these are bold strokes, because this is where you move. This is where we come in, and this is when you get that overwhelming feeling of not just Stone. Everybody's on Stone's side about making this movie. Jack Lemmon, and again, these are the stalwarts of, because Oppenheimer again,
big names in this,
big, famous elder statesman names. Everybody loves Lemmon. Everybody loves Walter Matthau. Everybody loves Ed Asner. These are famous American figures and liberals for the Ed Asner explicitly in his politics. And you get Lemmon here. If it makes people think as well as entertain them, I know it will entertain them because this is one of the great filmmakers, but to just make people think, not agree with the point of the film, which I have not seen. The film is not fact. Well, what was fact, that stupid report, the cover-up, the Warren report, the disappointing, terrible thing from that brilliant man, it was a whitewash. So every single interview is just, and then again, we got Walter Matthau. If it's in the newspapers, I'm suspicious. If it's political, I'm suspicious.
No, I thought it was nice to see so many sort of big names in this, kind of lending their public kind of weight to this conspiracy, essentially, this thing that's been always seen as this outlandish kind of crazy idea, which when you really sit back and look at it, makes more and more sense. Really.
Well, when you talk about Oppenheimer, or when you talk about Wes Anderson movies, it's always you look at the interviews and then it's like, well, I really wanted to work with Chris. All the interviews here are 50-50 of, well, I think Oliver Stone's an incredible filmmaker, and I think that this is Donald Sutherland. Why should people see this movie? It's the most important picture they're ever going to see in their lives. You get the feeling that these actors are reading this script and going, oh, Oliver Stone's in it, and Kevin Costner is probably going to be very big.
You get the sense that they're all doing this movie with the sense that this is an important movie to be making, essentially, that they believe in the message of what this movie is trying to put out there, as an artist, which is refreshing to see, because I don't think you really see that in Hollywood very often. I think you see actors who enjoy a piece or think that it's artistically interesting and worth exploring. But this seems like, I don't know, like almost like an act of protest in a way by these actors by being in this movie.
And this is where watching it as two, 20-year-olds in 2024, like we're very politically open-minded, very liberal, and we like film and stuff. But would most people just look at this film now as what separates this beyond $40 million? I'm saying this devil's advocate because I think there's an awful lot more research here and awful lot more rigor and sincerity and empathy. But what, other than $40 million, separates this from your average tinfoil hat? Has actually time and the word when we talk about there being a conspiracy, we're talking in the literal sense of the definition of the word conspiracy, whereas that word, Lord knows it's because of the presidencies we've had of the recent years, that word has become synonymous with QAnon, with it's become a catch. Pardon me, it's become a catch-all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was necessarily a very favorable term to be using about something in the 1960s even. I mean, I think there's the legal term of what conspiracy literally means by definition, and then there's labeling something a conspiracy, which kind of discredits it as something that only like lunatics believe. Now, I think the only way that you can like distinguish between those two things is like the evidence that is being reported and provided, and sort of like you have to have some critical thinking and judgment and ability to like look past your own biases at what's actually true, I guess. And we've had a lot of time since the JFK assassination. I guess we have the wonderful like gift of hindsight when it comes to the JFK assassination.
Well, it's like, I mean, this is where I see Stone as a sincere figure in this 4-hour documentary, Destiny Betrayed. He talks about how he was wrong about the homeless people stuff. Like one of the documents they released in the ARB, or maybe it was the second release of the ARB, was about the actual police interviews of these 4 homeless people. And it's like, okay, these probably weren't part of the conspiracy.
They probably were just drifters or something.
Yeah. And he admits that. And again, we go back to this. I like, well, a person that we both worked with, Stephen Dykes, the wonderful Stephen Dykes, he did a play about Oswald and Marina's sort of married life and that sort of thing. And he told me, he was like, I read all 1,000 pages. He did it alone, surely. I was like, Steve, I don't get. And it's the same with Norman Mailer. Norman Mailer, he wrote, I think the book was Oswald's Ghost. And he was like, he went fully in. And it was like, yeah, no, I went in thinking there was going to be a conspiracy. And then I did all of my stuff. Yeah, I think he did it alone. And there are those people. And there are those people that watch this and go, you've pulled the string too far and it's snapped. Occam's razor, the simplest solution is often the true one.
Yes.
It was, yeah.
It's just, I would agree, but the simplest answer we've been given is not that simple.
Yes.
As we see, I mean, 3 very well aimed shots from a bolt action rifle at a car that's moving laterally from you from like 5-6 stories up is an incredibly hard shot to make. And that's the truth of it, man.
I had a real rabbit hole situation because one of my favorite books ever is 11/22/63, Stephen King. And I love that miniseries as well. I actually think I kind of split opinion with King fans of whether that's actually a good miniseries. I think it's beautiful and I cry every time. And there is the 11/22/63 curse because every woman I show it to who I care about ends up leaving me. But
you better keep whipping it out then.
Yeah. You're gonna just keep going. And I was watching it with my last serious situation. She wasn't a girlfriend, unfortunately. That was a whole other matter. But she was King, I think for narrative reasons, but also in his afterward, he's like, I think Oswald was a sole shooter. It's like, okay, King. And I was like, I understand for narrative purposes making it like Oswald as a sole shooter, because I can't even imagine how long that book would be if he actually got deep into conspiracy stuff. It's a really good narrative decision. And so I had to like explain the rabbit hole of she was like, oh, so Oswald did do it. And I was like, well, no, Oswald, well, we don't think Oswald actually did do it. But this says, no, yeah, but that's because it's easier for King to kind of make it think. And then it just rabbit hole. And I've watched this film 100 times. I haven't. But I've watched this film like once a year for the past 10 years, probably. I still get lost some like around the 2 hour mark. I'm like, oh, 1 second, and then you know,
yeah,
bless you. You know, it's deep stuff.
Well, one could argue that with any good Black Ops kind of thing, that's exactly what's going to happen if you try to logic your way through it and piece it together. It should be the sort of thing that sends you into spiraling rabbit holes that make you sound crazy the longer you explain them, because that's how you effectively coup a country, is by sowing confusion and controlling the official narrative afterwards, so that anybody who questions that ultimately comes off as somewhat deranged and out of touch, you know?
You're goddamn right, David. And so here's what's the other quote I've got here. Robert Garden, former congressional photo analyst. Oliver came with an open mind. He wanted to see as many different viewpoints and resolve in his own mind what actually happened. And I believe that. And Oliver Stone was sort of acting like detectives, were like Sherlock Holmes. And here's his another big Stone quote. I present the clues as speculation. I'm sure that it's, you know, he went in stone in his shoe, pardon the pun, of like, what if I do it? What if I figure it out? And obviously that would be the perfect ending to this movie. However, we're never going to get that ending. And I firmly believe that now. I don't even think in my lifetime, I don't know. Because Mark Felt came out, we know who Deep Throat is. And in 1975, people thought they'd never find out who Deep Throat was. So I always think of Nora Ephron, who was dating Carl Bernstein at the time, and she saw his notes and it said MF, and he was like, "Is it Mark Felt?" And he was like, "No." Like,
no.
Yeah, it's like I love Nora so very much. It's like she wrote When I Met Sally and knew Deep Throat for 40 years, and also she would say all the time apparently.
Say
No, she would say all the time. She would be like, "Yeah, it's Mark Felt, guys." Nobody listens to it. And
I know who it is.
And what else we got? Well, this is where we'll end our first part. This movie had a leaked script of the first draft. Stone shot the 6th draft.
Yes.
And this is where you kind of get tinfoil hatted, because before that, the Chicago Tribune and the New York Times released hits saying, in the upcoming film JFK, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And then, you know, and Stone, he's so angry on the behind the scenes. They get in. It's great. This is why we should have Blu-rays and behind the scenes films. It's like they catch him at an awkward moment and he's like, there's an agenda here. These are trained Dobermans. They're protecting an old crime. Like, and of course you get that feeling.
I will say it's suspicious just how many like hit pieces attacking the writing and story and veracity of like everything and coming after Stone is like attacking JFK's legacy and tarnishing like, you know, this sorrowful moment in American history. Like it is a little suspicious just how many of those came out and how quickly and from such major publications, especially considering that like nowadays we know for a fact that the New York Times publishes like, you know, unsubstantiated hit pieces like they, you know, like we've seen that they did with October 7th and the whole like.
They're listening, David.
Hamas, the New York Times, we know it operates as a propaganda arm of the United States government, and it seems so convenient that, you know, while they're working on draft 1 of a script that they didn't begin shooting until they got to draft 6, that there was already hit pieces coming out about how awful this movie was and tarnishing the legacy of the JFK like presidency and that mournful time in American history. I think it's highly convenient, sir.
It is.
Anyways.
No, it definitely is. We know what's happening. However, this movie was critically beloved This is an incredibly well-made film. It goes beyond saying. And when it came to the Oscars, got a lot of acclaim. This is, you could make the argument, if you change a couple of things, this is one of the best, like if you just move a couple of the movies around, you could end up with one of the great Best Picture, Best Director lineups. The Best Picture, this is the year of Silence of the Lambs. So Silence of the Lambs takes the big five. It takes picture and it takes director. The picture slot is Silence of the Lambs, JFK, Beauty and the Beast, the first animated movie to ever be nominated, and then Bugsy, which is Warren Beatty as Bugsy Siegel, is a fun movie, and then Prince of Tides, which is Barbara Streisand, beautiful, wonderful movie. She doesn't get nominated for Best Director. Billy Crystal does a very funny joke. He does, "Don't tell me not to direct this film, I've got to." And then, and then it's like 10 nominations on the shelf. Did this film direct itself? Because Barbara didn't get the nomination for Best Director. And very happy with it. He always does that joke because he did it again with the
so it was just a fun night of shitting on Barbara Streisand, and then awards were handed out.
I think he was like, he was. Yeah, I think he's happy. Yeah. Sorry, he's she should have been.
He was poking a little fun in her direction. I just like to think that it was a night full. All of his monologues were nothing but Barbara Streisand jokes, and then he would also hand out an award.
The night of shitting on Barbara was when they gave her the presenting the award to Catherine Bigelow as the first woman, and it's kind of I don't think it's political, but when it's like, Barbara, you were one of the first, like you were not the first female director, but like what you did with using your leverage and using your star to make Yentl, to make The Mirror Has Two Faces, and to make Prince of Tides was incredible. We never nominated you. We want you to give Catherine Bigelow the award. And she does say, she says something like, "It's finally time." What does she say? She says something like, "It's time." I'm going to Google that.
I was going to say, if you're asking me what Barbara Streisand said at such and such Oscars, I think you're going to be waiting for a while.
It's, ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Streisand. I directed a lot of movies. Wait a minute. Here we go. Oh, wait. Here it is. She says.
And the winner is.
And the winner is. Well, the time has come. She says, "Well, the time has come," and then everybody cheers, and like knowing that Catherine's won, and that knowing this incredible moment in Oscar history has been made. All my life, I've thought it'd be funny if she went, "Well, the time has come. James Cameron, Avatar." Anyway, and then you get your director nominations, which are Demi wins for Silence, obviously. Stone is nominated for JFK. You've got then Barry Levinson for Bugsy, bizarre. John Singleton for Boys in the Hood, incredible nomination. And Ridley for Thelma and Louise. If you just like kind of move around Boys in the Hood and Thelma and Louise and Prince of Tides, you could end up with the all-timer five noms. Only one nomination, acting nomination, David.
Really?
And it was for Best Supporting Actor. Now, this is the sort of movie where you could nominate everybody for Best Supporting Actor.
Mm.
Who do you think got nominated?
Gary Oldman?
No. Good choice. Tommy Lee as Clay. I know, that was my reaction. Love Tommy Lee.
I mean, like,
he's great, but
he's great. I didn't think he was like. I thought he was great. I guess I just didn't feel like Clay Shaw was an impactful enough character in his own right.
Yeah. For me,
in the way that like Lee Harvey Oswald's character was.
Gary Oldman, literally, here we go. I get obsessed when I work. I get possessed. Like there, Stone gave him an envelope of money allegedly to go to Russia and go to Cuba and research Oswald. And obviously, Oldman is, for lack of a better way to say it, a bit nutty in that sense, and did it. He became Oswald for a year, more or less. And there's on the Blu-ray, there was just like this night where it was like, I've just got some things to say. Can you give me the camera and we'll just shoot some stuff? And it's just like this 16-minute monologue of Gary Oldman as Oswald, and
Wow,
just completely semi-improvised,
just
and
going real hard into the Meisner shit.
and Stone considered ending the movie with it. And now I don't know if
That might have been a little bit of a stretch. Think a good his editor or whoever stepped in and said, "Easy, Chief. Probably should have been given a raise."
Well, this is the thing. For me, the Best Supporting Actor nomination is just so easy. I am a huge fan, of like Beatrice Straight winning for Network for doing like one scene with the divorce.
Yeah.
And I get the dark ditch. I love people coming in for one scene and stealing the whole film. And has there ever been a more movie stealing thing than Donald Sutherland as X?
that was my next one. I mean, honestly, you could give it to Donald Sutherland. I was gonna say John Candy as well, but honestly, John Candy just came on screen and was John Candy. Like he was.
Daddy-o. But this is the thing, David. John Candy is cast because, and I've now seen footage of Dean Andrews. It is bizarre. They are the same person.
He fits, yeah. And that was kind of what I liked, was seeing that John Candy was doing this sort of like over the top funny role without it coming off as like necessarily like he was funny. Don't get me wrong, I laughed at his character, but the fact that like this is the guy that was gonna like be the defense attorney for like a once in a lifetime like fucking country shaking pace, holy shit, this is terrifying. It's
like, it's one of the, truth is stranger than fiction. And, these sorts of characters of Dean Andrews, of your David Ferries, like the idea of David Ferry caging mice to cure cancer is the sort of shit where if I put that in a script and sent it to you, you'd be like, really interesting character beat with the mice, but why is it in there? Like, truth is stranger than fiction. It's what, and is this movie true? Or who knows? 10-minute stretches, right? There's a sort of 10-minute stretch of Kevin Bacon as Willie O'Keefe into David Ferry's Last Night on Earth, which is the all-time like back to back of you've got Kevin Bacon. You don't know because you've never been fucked in the ass, and And what a wonderful twist on that scene of like you think, okay, so he's gay, okay, he could be quite liberal maybe, and he doesn't want to, he wants the real people to come out to get the credit because he hates like what he hates racist.
He hated JFK. He's like, these guys did a great thing. I love the twist of like, oh, he's just racist as shit. Which, hey, that's America for you.
And then straight into David Ferry, like in that hotel room, and Pesci just going full hog, just sticking in his food, sticking in his beard. He's gonna look fucking ridiculous without his beard, and going mental. And you're like, all right, I'm in, Oliver, I'm in. You've got me.
I had never known just how like educated and well-traveled Lee Harvey Oswald was. The impression that was always given to us, like growing up, and this could be entirely just me not doing very well in social studies or history class, which I did, but the impression that we were always given was that Lee Harvey Oswald was just kind of this disgruntled veteran who happened to have a rifle in the book depository that day.
Yeah. An uneducated rube, who was just so happened to be friends with George de Montshield, a very high class. None of that gets mentioned. The only picture you ever see of him is that famous shot of him being, shot. Shot, yeah,
from his assassination. That was the only picture I ever really saw of Lee Harvey Oswald, was that moment where he's been hit.
If nothing else, if you leave this movie with nothing else, it's if Oswald was just a sad loner who wanted the world to know his name, why would he say he was a patsy? Like these assassins are different from killers. Well,
if he was out for the glory and the name of it, he wouldn't be trying to cast it off of himself even as it was happening.
We go back to 1800, whatever, Sic Semper Tyrannis, Booth.
Yeah, they make a statement. They want to jump out and tell you, this is why I killed the guy.
Quite infamously, there's a big difference between killing a civilian and choosing to kill the president of the In the Line of Fire. I fucking love In the Line of Fire. And John Malkovich is Mitch Leary or whatever he's called. And he's like, no, Mitch Leary is the LSD guy. Anyway, whatever. And no, that's Timothy Leary. I'm correct. Mitch Leary. Anyway, and he's like, an assassin must choose to trade their life for the president's. There is no, everybody, you can't get away with it.
Yeah.
And we go back to that. The witnesses, this is just an incredibly well edited and well shot movie. The wonderful Robbie Robertson, a cinematographer. And who edited it? They won, I believe. But when people talk about, I'm infamously the guy who loves 3-hour movies and that never end. Not like the Pietro Scalia and Josh Hutch thing. But this movie just moves so well.
It does.
And it's episodic in nature, I guess, but
it kept me engrossed, really. There wasn't really a point where I was just kind of sitting there bored or feeling like, okay, this is stuff we've got over already, or I don't really want, this isn't a scene that I really care about. Like, everything felt tight, everything felt well written, like, and it was explained well enough that I was able to keep up, as someone who knows the rough details of Kennedy's assassination, I was able to keep up, and it brought me along with the conspiracy element really well, and tied that into the story in a way that was compelling, because at the same time that the characters were learning new things, I was learning new things.
Yeah.
And I think it was a movie that did a very good job of kind of showing all these different points of view and sort of letting you sit there and think about it while the plot carried you along in a way. It didn't feel like it was hammering home something over and over again, but more that it was just unloading all of this information and showing the characters processing it at the same time I was, which was, very engrossing.
Yeah. And then on top of all of that, you've got incredibly fun performances that keep it going.
Yeah,
this is not a slow unfolding of boring exposition. You've got
a very young Michael Rooker.
Very young Michael Rooker. Yeah, he's wonderful.
I didn't realize it was him until his blow up where he walks out on the team. And I was like, wait a second.
We get Laurie Metcalf, Vincent D'Onofrio. I presume his scene must have been cut, but Vincent D'Onofrio is just the one witness with his baby, and he's just I saw something from the grassy knoll. There must have been a scene. This is post Full Metal Jacket. You don't get Vincent D'Onofrio. I don't know. Acting's weird.
I mean, the number of big names that were in this, who knows, who they were calling in. I mean, yeah.
Great. But everybody's flipping sides. It's fun and games, man. It's wonderful. Ed
Asner is an anti-commie, super racist drunk private eye that beats his best friend.
I love Jack Lemmon. I love Jack Lemmon to the end of my life. And him just showing up for 5, I don't know. Guy said all these things, and I listened to some of it, and I don't know. It's very, and that is one of those things that, again, very early deployment of people that we love. To have Walter Matthau for your one scene of, I don't believe a goddamn word of it, and he tells a funny joke about, oh, the world's going crazy now, love child, all these hippies. Okay, funny, And it's okay, we love Walter Matthau. This is nice. And then he's the first person to be like, this is bullshit. Next person we talk to is Jack Lemmon, one of the most lovable people ever to be put on screen. And you're like, okay. We don't go straight, and then to a similar degree, but completely different, John Candy, lovable John Candy. And you're like, okay. And it's subliminal kind of. I'll jump straight to some of these Thomas Wheeler's specific favorite parts. The wonderful Martin Sheen as the opening narration. And, this is before The West Wing, where he becomes the voice of the American public. And,
the voice of the American president.
Just well, everybody, we try. And
what is the value of a proportional response?
That's another one where like the West Wing, as time goes by, has more bad been done to the West Wing of like people look at Aaron Sorkin now as just like a naivete. And I think there is a lot more to West Wing.
Quick, just like sidebar on Aaron Sorkin and the West Wing. I mean, I watched the West Wing growing up with my dad, and it is like it is as is all of like Aaron Sorkin's work, I think, in a way. It is like the absolute distillation of like neoliberal kind of politics, I guess. This idea that like the institutions themselves are good and working ultimately towards good. It's just about the people that are in them, steering them in the right direction.
Yeah.
But never is there like, you know, that famous scene where they're talking, what is the value of proportional response? Like, why does America have troops in this country to be like killed by these random people anyways? And why is it able to just drop bombs on them as retaliation because like we're unhappy about it? Like, sure, we like that there's a president who is like debating these things, and it's chilling to see him like, you know, drop out of it. But never is it questioned like the veracity of like what America is doing or why.
I think he kind of tried that with Newsroom. Like that the scene of Jeff Daniels, you know, I don't believe there is no United States of America. That like that 5-minute scene that circulates every kind of like once a month if you're in our sort of Facebook channels.
Yeah,
and
America is not the greatest country on the world anymore. World anymore.
and you're like, okay, all right, really good scene. But the rest of the Newsroom is just kind of incredible idea. Like they were shooting a lot of that stuff week by week. So that it was about the real news stories. But when you're talking about real stuff, and because to be honest, I always felt that was a response to the sort of vagueness of West Wing at times of like, well, we're in the middle of a, you know, it's like, okay, right, but you're not going to actually say Putin, like you're not going to actually say these things. And it's the same with American President. I mean, that's a beautiful romance movie, but like the politics of that at times of like, you know, this is not a good day. And when they say, congratulations, sir. What do you you know, that sort of stuff. It's all kind of vague, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, Kennedy is a figure, you know, I love the New England accent on breathe the same air.
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 Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And there is that thing of later when Costner has said he wasn't meant to cry in the final summation, but the weight of what he was saying overcame it. And he did start crying. And there is that thing of, again, you can be, maybe we're completely naive. Maybe I'm naive. JFK, I do see him as a shining knight. I know that's ridiculous to say, and people are incredibly complex, and there was terrible things that he put forward. But for the most part, I do kind of believe it. And to have
politics it's never as simple as all that. Like, there was plenty of problematic shit that JFK did. But I think in terms of like American presidents, he was probably one of the biggest champions of like just kind of progressive values, and was probably really committed, maybe one of the last American presidents who was really truly committed to like changing the systems of government around him to suit the people better.
But then we go back to the boring, then we go back to the ultimate point, which is we can say whatever we want about him because in the end of the day,
he's dead.
Bang. Like, you know, at the end, you know, we can validate him, we can glamorize him, we can make him an angel because we can say he would have stopped Vietnam. He would have done, you know, with MLK, the civil rights would have been a lot quicker. Is that actually the truth of what would have happened after 8 years?
Maybe it isn't. We would have gotten, I mean, the levers of power in politics are rarely so cut and dry. But I would say that John F. Kennedy was one of the last presidents to be so openly, I would say the last president, to be so openly critical of the U.S. military-industrial complex and the intelligence community at large. He's the last American president to have ever publicly spoken out against the CIA in any sort of way, and the last American president to make budget cuts to the CIA.
If anything, if you want to take, again, if you want to take anything from JFK, ignore the whole thing. But to put Alan Dulles on the Warren Report, the man that he fired because of his distrust and hatred of the CIA, is not like,
It seems suspicious as hell.
the police the police body is an entirely other corrupt body, but even they have legislation about you can't investigate your dad's death, or like you can't, there is conflict of interest. And to have the biggest investigation ever brought, and to have, yeah, well, he fired me, but let's find out who shot him. Sure. I don't know why my impression of Alan Dulles is like the guy from The Honeymooners.
It's accurate, I'm sure.
I love Brian Doyle Murray as Jack Ruby, especially when he screams, Oswald!
Oswald!
I love the arrival of David Ferry with his wig and eyebrows. Again, I will never forget the first time I watched the film and thought that they just lost money on the wig budget.
This is where they made the cuts.
Dean Andrews' incredible sweat and just saying, cat daddy-o. And then later, Costner saying, do you dig me? And it's like, you're completely out of touch.
Do you dig me?
The incredible editing of the intercutting of Laurie Metcalf delivering Oswald's history, and then that slow reveal of what we come to realize is like conspiratorial hypothetical footage, possibly, of the cutting and pasting of the new face onto the famous Oswald rifle. And you're like, okay, slipping it in. It's almost subliminal. And
that was one of the ones that I felt was a little more far-fetched. And there was a point where I was sort of like wondering, okay, so they're investigating the Cuban mafia. At this point, they're investigating the CIA, the FBI, the Justice Department, the Cuban mafia, the gay community of like this particular region in New Orleans, and this one dude who is an ex-Marine. And I was just like, wow, this like, it's hard. And I think that was kind of something that was interesting, and maybe one of the reasons that they sort of altered the character of Garrison to a degree, was because it would have been so easy for him to come off as this absolute fucking lunatic, like just pulling and grasping at all these different strings and trying to make a story out of it all. But which is where
I think there's an interesting movie to be made. I mean, it would never be made because the shadow of this looms so much. But like, there is an interesting thing of the actual Garrison movie. And I don't think that this movie would be better, to be honest. And I know that and maybe that's my own agenda of what I believe, but I don't think this movie would be better with a more realistic depiction of Garrison.
I don't think so either. The whole drive of this movie has to be that there's some logic here that would make a rational person, like, question this, narrative.
I find it so interesting watching the deleted scenes where Stone draws the line, because like, there's the deleted scene where it's like showing Ruby getting injected with cancer cells. Like, he didn't just die of cancer in his cell. No, the government injected him with cancer cells. And there is that thing of Stone. I don't know the decision process of like, is this too far? Like, what will people take? What and where is the bow of my movie completely falling apart?
It's a line he treaded really well, I think. Because I think if you had gotten to the point where you're like, okay, so the government sent secret agents in armed with special cancer cell syringes that just happened to like kill this guy overnight, sort of thing. That feels more of a stretch. And also, like, how do you know that? There's like, sure, I believe you that the government probably had a hand in killing him somehow, but how do you know that they injected him with cancer cells, sort of thing?
But I also I think there is many intentional choices with Robert Richardson's photography of of what's black and white and what's not, and like and that sort of element, and in particular when they're talking about the Oswald decoys, like Frank Whaley, look at the big brain on Brat, when he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was shooting at that son of a bitch Kennedy. And it's like, it's really good stuff. Later, when we become to learn about Clay Shaw, and it says, how was your moose? And in that interview, you have a very large table. Yes, I do have a lovely Chippendale dining table. the horse sound effect when David Ferry does a line of coke. And this is the sort of stuff where we're like, "Hey, Oliver," but it's incredibly, incredibly fun.
Yeah.
I love during the X when he's out like, I would have never allowed that unusual curve. They're never allowed to drop down to 10 miles per hour, and I would have never allowed somebody to open an umbrella.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, Donald, oh, you've got something here. I've always enjoyed the way that Donald Sutherland counts to 5. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Again, like you wanted to, this is not a subtle movie in any way, but there is an incredibly striking image of the Washington Monument hanging overshadowing the whole conversation with X, which is like, again, the most obvious thing in the world to do, but works like a dream.
Works great. And I mean, even having, oh my goodness, I had the cast pulled up here and now it's just not working with me. Even having Kevin Costner walking out in front of the Lincoln Memorial at that moment, and his face just perfectly comes in line with Lincoln for a brief moment before
like
walking on down the steps.
You want him to say like, "What do I do?"
Abraham Lincoln never told a lie. Good old Honest Abe.
Honest Abe.
Good old honest Jim Garrison.
I don't think anybody's honest anymore, Abe. You know, like. Oliver, I want to do a monologue. No, Kevin, keep moving. I've got it.
No, come on, Kevin. We've got to wrap this up for the day.
I've got 5 more pages of conspiracy bullshit I need to do.
And I got another 20 minutes of Gary's monologues to fit into this shit somewhere.
I gotta shoot a fucking 16-minute scene with Gary. I like the idea of Oliver Stone as like a director for hire. Well, like this was a script that just got sent around, and he's like, "Do you want to make this? Yeah, sure." And he doesn't actually care. I love Back into the Left. Obviously, I do genuinely love Costner choking up on, "They want the country back, and do not forget your dying king." And then we end, what is past is prologue, and this is dedicated to the young in whose spirit the search for the truth marches on. I left this rewatch and this research I did with a very, very sympathetic and sincere impression of Oliver Stone. And again, I may be naive, I may be stupid, but that's how I feel.
I don't think so. I think there was a lot of sincerity in this movie, and it seems like in all of his work, really.
I want to do. I think we do Nixon next, because Nixon is a movie where, like, he hates Nixon, and he paints it almost like a Greek tragedy, and it really, like, that's a movie that is completely lost to time. Like, nobody talks about that anymore. I saw a list the other day where, like, it was like worst best actor nominations, and there was Anthony Hopkins, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, there is a scene later where he's crying about, like, how he's going to have to resign. And I'm like, you could make the argument this is some of Hopkins' best work. And it is just plagued by this thing of, like, he looks nothing like Nixon. and so it's this very bizarre, I'll pencil in Nixon. Great movie. I think it's on Disney Plus again. Whoever's working at Disney Plus is an Oliver Stone fan, because they recently had, like, JFK, Natural Born Killers, and Nixon.
We're gonna get something radical on this platform. God help me.
that would be interesting if, like, David Zaslav at Warner Brothers, he keeps, canceling all these movies. He gets rid of Batgirl, gets rid of Acme versus Coyote versus Acme, and he's just like, but what we are going to do is re-release 1991's JFK, because Stone was right.
It's an important movie at this time.
The building or set. I think this is where we talk about the fact that he spent $4 million to fully restage the assassination of JFK, which is fucking insane.
There was moments I was watching this, I was like, did they, like, go to did they go to Dallas and shoot on location?
Yes.
Or did they?
No, that's Dealey Plaza. It was cost $4 million.
Come on, no wonder there was, like, some controversy attracted to this, because it's like, hey guys, we're gonna go out to the exact spot where John F. Kennedy's brains were blown out on live television and do it all over again.
Well, this is so a movie that I just bought, haven't watched, and isn't critically beloved, is his World Trade Center movie. And with Nicolas Cage, and that is not conspiratorial, I believe. That is just like sort of Magnolia
Here's
of 9/11.
The events, yeah.
Like it's got a load of different sides of things. And Nicolas Cage is a fireman, one of the firemen involved. And I'm interested in watching that. I mean, I'm always interested in Stone. I'm always interested. I remember Steve talking about Spike Lee, and he was like, even if it's a bad movie, it's going to be incredibly entertaining and well made. And Steve said the phrase, "I love how he tells a story," and that's how I feel about Stone. Like I love how he tells a story. But like, you know, and you've got footage of the behind the scenes of the Stone, and he's like walking around and he goes, "There should be an agent up there," and I'm like, "You are so in." Like, and in the commentary, Oliver Stone said that the filming of the murder was probably the hardest 2 weeks of his life. However, he maintained that it was a powerful moment for it. It is kind of that thing of there isn't, it was something that needed to be done for this film. You're right about using actual dealing, but I don't know how Dallas allowed it. This is my big thing, because they also shoot on the 6th floor museum. That is the real corner that they're using. They spent, I think it was $2 million or something to put all the boxes in and then make it like the museum again, and another $2 million to like reroute all the traffic and shoot for those 2 weeks in Dallas. Shit. And it's like, I understand that is maybe the cornerstone of your entire movie, but that is a big fucking swing.
That is a big
but it does it.
And I guess, like, not necessarily something that would have been difficult to overcome in other ways, but like, holy shit, as an actor, like, how could you not give a better performance, you know, than like standing where it actually happened, you know?
People talk about
to look the way it was at the time, you know, like, I think that would that probably gets an amazing performance, you know.
I don't know how they I just don't know how they pulled it off. Like, how did they not populate that? Like, they could have populated those extras.
Convincing the city of Dallas is really the hard part, I would imagine. But I guess if you've got millions of dollars to throw at them in 1991, maybe that helps, you know. But
and there is a morbid sensibility to Dealey Plaza still. I mean, they have that X on the road. You know, it's and the 6th floor museum. But that's my big thing, is the museum allowing it, because the museum is completely Oswald based, I believe.
Yeah,
they are fervent on it being Oswald. So I don't know. Interesting.
Well, indeed. I mean, you know, if it is a museum dedicated to the official narrative, then that's what it would be about, isn't it?
A few best lines. I really think Costner, and it's a very early line in the film, and it's one of those where you're either in or you're out. I think Costner pulls off, "God, I'm ashamed to be an American today."
Yeah, I think he pulled that off.
Because that is one hell of a line to throw in at like your 10-minute mark.
It was a weird start. Kevin Costner's performance like had me kind of shaky going into this. I was like, what is he doing with this guy? Between like the you know, the strong accent and just like the very kind of like, he came across as a dork at first. You know what I mean?
It's not really until, and then when he's reading it with his, you know, like, we've not even mentioned Sissy Spacek's name yet, and I really think that is one of the weaker parts of the film, to be frank. And we'll talk about that in What's the Change. But like, when he's just like, they interviewed him for 15 hours and they didn't write any of it down. And like, it's like he's finding out these things for the first time. And obviously in 1964 or whatever, like, he probably is. But like, he's reading, it's like, did you know that the one report interviewed 7 different witnesses and they didn't ask about it? And he's like, okay, yeah, all right. So he's getting radicalized. Dean Andrews, "Kennedy's as dead as that crab meat. The government's alive and breathing. You want to line up with me, dead man Jimbo?" Very good. You know, and then, well, a very good actor. And then after Clay gives his deposition, well, a very great actor just gave a very great performance. And then, I mean, I go back to my, you don't know anything, Mr. Garrison, because you've never been fucked in the ass. The wonderful Kevin Bacon. So, yeah, we've got 4 minutes. What did we talk about before? I'll throw in a few fun facts. Stone gave Oldman yeah, I mentioned that. So this is another thing where, like, you've got people coming in for like one scene, like Vieta Posnayek, who played Marina Oswald, and she studied the 26 volumes of the Warren Commission and read every single Time and Newsweek magazine article about her character, and then actually lived with the real Marina for a little while. And she is like barely in this movie, which makes me believe.
Yeah, she's like all of maybe 3 shots or so over the course of like, oh my God, wow. That's intensive.
So the reason they cast Frank Whaley as the Oswald imposter is because he was an early choice for Oswald himself. And I can actually see it, which makes the, it was rated on Entertainment Weekly's top 25 most controversial movies of all time. It was rated number 5. And I think it still feels controversial today.
It does, yeah.
Early choice for Harrison Ford would have been great.
Yeah, Harrison Ford would have absolutely killed that role. Very
similar sort of Shining Knight on the Hill, all American.
Yeah.
Would have been great. When Oliver Stone spoke at the National Press Club about the movie, someone asked him if he meant to insinuate that the government was involved in the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, as well as JFK's. And he replied with a simple one-word answer: yes.
Yeah. Did you watch the fucking movie?
Tagline rundown: the story that won't go away. And then here we go. Here it is. He's a district attorney. He will risk his life, the lives of his family, everything he holds dear for the one thing he holds sacred: the truth.
Oh, let justice be done or the heavens fall.
Do not forget your fallen king. And then, yeah, we're going to take a break now, and we'll be back with, I'll mention now my best specific Halloween costume, David, which is a new category, and there is only one answer, and it is we all go dressed in Marie Antoinette costumes. You're dressed in gold, and we all do anal nitrate and go around as the Clay Shaw, David Ferry gay underworld sex party. I mean, that is the only response.
There we go. I'm up for it. I'm up right now just thinking about it.
There we go. So we'll come back and talk about changes, and also specifically about a few of these hit pieces and rebuttals, and then we will answer the question of who killed JFK. No, kidding. But we'll be thinking momentarily. 1. There are people in this world, David, who are not as congratulatory and happy with this film as we are. Before we get to them, I'll get to a few of my own changes.
Yes.
Garrison waking up in the middle of the night with with him coming to realize about something about the case is the exact same as the joke in Annie Hall where he doesn't want to have sex, and so he's like, your mind's on something else. Is good. I know the magic bullet. It doesn't make any sense. The Twitter clip. This came about. There was a Twitter clip of somebody clipping a moment. There is an exact moment in this movie where a woman points at a signature and we hear the gunshot, and it is so bizarre and awkward. And this movie is full of it. I mean, I talked earlier positively about David Ferry snorting a line of coke and a horse being sounded. The day of the day, again, this movie does very well at making exposition interesting. But during the Clay Bertram is Clay Shaw reveal, we're at a Day of the Dead festival, and there is just like a skeleton screaming in the camera's face. And I'm like, okay, all right, calm down. Jesus Christ. After all of 15 minutes of X, Garrison says, I don't believe it. I don't believe it because it was just because he wanted to change things, which again is funny in itself. But now, after years have passed, is the exact same punchline as in Zoolander. But why male models? You know, the Jim Garrison cameo as Earl Warren where he's like, I know of no facts that would deny the report's findings. You couldn't give him a cameo as somebody who believes in the case. I mean, obviously he was happy with doing the cameo, but I was like, you couldn't give him like one of the guys who like believes in the case,
who's like behind it,
Yeah.
like who's behind like the investigation,
And then this is the one. This is the all-time change. So the whole time you've got Sissy Spacek going, she's talking to the black maid. Pull yourself together, honey. I was like, she's been like so shrill and annoying this entire movie. And it's not Sissy Spacek's fault. It's just a bad character. And then we get one of the most unintentionally funny scenes ever, which is when Bobby Kennedy gets shot and he climbs into bed and he says, they shout Bobby. And her first reaction is, oh my God, you were right. Oh my God, you were right. They start kissing. They then start like groping to have sex, at which point she says, I could have loved you more. I wish I loved you more. And then they start having sex. Now, I don't know about your sexual proclivities, David, but that's not the assassination of Bobby Kennedy is not the sort of thing that would keep me going.
I thought they needed like to have some sort of like personal stake for him beyond just like caring for democracy. So I get the inclusion of like the element of his family, and he's like losing to, his obsession with this case is causing him to like lose time with his family, and it's like straining his marriage.
We've seen it all the time.
Perfectly believable. I just thought it was a really weird way to just wrap all of that up. Was like, well, Bobby Kennedy got shot, and now she believes him and is also horny again.
Yeah.
Like they're both into each other now, and they can move on because like. I just thought I thought it really invalidated like her perfectly valid like I thought it was an interesting kind of point of view to have in there. Like, what if he is just crazy and he's just digging at something that he shouldn't be digging into anymore? What if he is right? So he is right, and everything you're saying is true. What are you going to do other than destroy yours and your family's lives and potentially get them killed? Like, I thought it was a very sort of interesting point of view to have. And then it was all just kind of thrown away so that she could become the loving, supporting wife character at the end, and they could live happily ever after, with like something of a satisfying wrap up. So I thought it was kind of weak.
Yeah, it's quite bizarre. Let's go through some of these hit pieces. So the Times, this is July 1st, 1991. And here's a rather incriminating statement. Stone is only halfway through shooting his movie about the assassination. Okay, all right, fair enough. You're gonna do that. And this is where they start throwing in stuff about how in the early draft of Stone's script, we learn that Oswald was just a pawn, and he that ranged from seedy gay bars in the French Quarter to the corridors of power in Washington. We meet bizarre characters like David Ferry. We are told that as many as 7 shots have been fired at Kennedy from 3 different directions, none of them by Oswald. The killing was planned, and this goes on forever. And they talk about all of this. And then here we go. Stone. Your suggestion that I tried to stop the making of the movie Libra, a fictionalized account of the JFK assassination, is outrageous. No one I know in the film business, not even competing studio heads, has the power to stop any any movie. And here's this big thing. You review an unauthorized and outdated draft of the script, which amazes me, since Time usually reviews finished movies. After 25 years, don't our movie, JFK and Garrison, deserve a serious and fresh hearing, not old attitude? And this is where we get to something that I never really realized until reading all of this stuff. I don't know how his opinion has changed through the years, but Stone, I think, is all for Garrison's side, and I didn't really know that side of things, and I don't know how much of that has changed, how much he actually believes about Clay Shaw being involved. That's the tough part.
I mean, ultimately, Clay Shaw was just one potential piece to unravel like the wider conspiracy. So I mean, like, I guess his level of involvement was ultimately relatively unimportant as compared to just being able to prove that there was a conspiracy through having at least one person involved in it. Yeah, it's interesting. It is strange to me. He makes a very good point. I've never heard of any other movie being so. I've never heard of anyone reviewing outdated, unfinished scripts of a movie that's still in production, and that being like run as like film criticism, or as a like when does that ever happen?
Well, this is the thing. We're now looking at this with hindsight, and we know that this is a good movie. Whether you believe in the politics or not, this is an incredibly well-made movie. At the time, there is the 50% chance, at least, that this is a complete fucking mess and goes down as like, do you remember that JFK movie? Have you ever watched that? It's really weird and bad and doesn't make any sense. Whereas, we lead to this. This is his response, basically. The shooting of JFK. This is an Esquire article. In the bar of the Westin Hotel in downtown New Orleans, just blocks from where the plot to kill the 35th president of the United States may or may not have been hatched, Oliver Stone is a little upset. Actually, more than a little upset. He is in the midst of a colossal rant, fighting back at the Doberman pinchers of the establishment, otherwise known as those members of the national press intent on destroying his still aborting film JFK. You should be fucking ashamed of yourself, he shouts, face flushed. You call yourselves journalists? You caricatures of journalism. Drained and sweaty from a tense day in the editing room, Stone is sucking on limes, throwing back shots of tequila. It's not journalism you are doing, it's fucking propaganda. You are working for the Ministry of Information. You have become Winston Smith. You have become George Orwell's creation. You could be a Russian working for Stalin in Pravda in 1935. You are liars. You just invent history. You should go back to school and learn honesty. That's where it starts. Honesty.
Wow. Holy shit. I mean, they were harassing this man.
I know. I'm kind of fully in.
That they so clearly, there was so clearly like someone was very against this movie being made, I think.
And here's, then the moment is as rare as it is appealing, as his performance that jangly July afternoon demonstrated. Being noisily raw-edged is Oliver Stone's trademark. He likes making incendiary statements, suggesting, for instance, that George Bush should shoot himself. This is where I'm
I love that little inclusion.
Yeah, I'm just like, this is where I'm kind of all in. And this is where we have the negative of hindsight. Like, we weren't around when Oliver Stone was releasing his movies. I never knew that he made a statement saying that George Bush should shoot himself. But that's probably the sort of stuff at the time where where that sort of thing is what am I even saying? Like, that would be commonplace. We would know that had happened.
That would be common knowledge, yeah.
We would be going into JFK with the concept of, okay, but
this
Oliver
is that
Stone
guy who said the president should shoot himself. Which, he wasn't exactly wrong.
So the character of X is a conflation of multiple people, but specifically L. Fletcher Prouty, who was in deep intel of the CIA. And so, again, one of the biggest arguers, people against this movie was Tom Wicker, who I believe was, Tom Wicker of the New York Times. I believe. Is it the New York Times? I believe it is. Or maybe I'm completely wrong. I think I'm right. Tom Wicker. And so L. Fletcher Prouty literally came out because Wicker kept suggesting that there is a fanatic who Stone has gotten all of his research from. And he went, I happen to be that fanatic who Oliver Stone asked to serve as an advisor to him and his screenwriters, for the simple reason that I had lived through that era and had been working for the Joint Chiefs of Staff where President Kennedy ordered the publication of the National Security Action Memorandum, saying precisely those things that I have written above. Very interesting. So then, there's just reams and reams of statements and rebuttals and you can go deep on just this.
Of course, nowadays it would be like 80,000 Twitter threads.
And then you lose the thread. You lose the thread there, and
you
it
lose the
becomes
thread of what it's all talking about in the end.
Exactly. And yeah, so and then you get this guy from the Boston Globe. So I'm going to say it like this: Thomas
Boston
Oliphant,
Globe.
and he's got this whole thing where he's like, "Fucking bullshit, man. That's not what this movie is." He alleges a conspiracy so vast, military intelligence, even Lyndon Johnson, as to be ridiculous. That's wrong. Stone, there's no such thing in my eyes. In his spell-blinding blend of drama, documentary, and even dramatized documentary, he suggests possibilities through his characters and then illustrates them. His point of view is clearly that the president's murder originated in military intelligence. However, Stone leaves one free to accept all or none of his suggestions. I'm gonna just drop it. Only elitist Washington would assume a mass audience of zombies incapable of viewing a political film carefully and critically. Now, is there something to be said in the sense of this Thomas Oliphant is actually giving audiences credit? Because for the most part, somebody would watch this and go, "Wow, that's exactly what happened." Like they really. You're telling me they copy and pasted a picture of Oswald onto it? So, oh my God, because there is it's a bit like what you're saying with the idea of a war movie never being unpolitical. Like there being no what's
anti-war movie.
Yeah, like the power of film. All the President's Men lives on, and there are parts that mostly that's an historically accurate film. There are parts of that movie, I think, where like Bernstein, does a little trick to get into an office. Anyway, that is history now. Whether that, dangerously so. Like, and All the President's Men is a fine example because it's not like too ridiculous, but like that is history now in so many ways.
And I mean, that's kind of, I think, the discounted power of art in general is sort of, you can have this very factual story. If you sat there and listed out all the facts that are laid out in this movie, or all the conspiracy facts, I guess, or, the alleged facts of that this movie puts forward, if you just sat down and had a conversation with someone where you laid all of these things out and explained them one by one, be incredibly dull, and I don't think you'd get very far with that person in terms of like getting them to think or consider what you're talking about. But you make a movie like this, and suddenly you can get, millions of people potentially talking about a subject. Whether or not they agree with you, they're thinking about it and talking about it and discussing it, and it is like reawakened and touched their lives in a very personal way.
We go back to what Jack Lemmon said at the start. As long as it makes people think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Stone is arrogant enough to say this is exactly the truth of what happened. I think he wishes he could, but I don't. I think this movie is about asking questions and using Garrison's case as a narrative to just throw all this shit at the wall, at the cinema screen, and say, take what of this you will. But at the end of the day, something stinks.
Something stinks here. Where there's smoke.
December 23, 1991, Time magazine interviews Oliver Stone. Do you feel you as a filmmaker have a responsibility to historical fact? Whenever you start to dictate to an artist his social responsibility, you get into an area of censorship. I think the artist has the right to interpret and reinterpret history and the events of his time. It's up to the artist himself to determine his own ethics by his own conscience. I completely agree. Are you comfortable with this film in your own conscience? Totally. I dispute the objective version of events. The entire Warren Commission report is a rat's nest of confusing facts that's been pointed out, not just by me, but by many critics before me. And this is what we were talking about earlier. Is it accurate to say that you think the assassinations of Kennedy, King, and Bobby Kennedy are linked? I think the removal of the three most progressive leaders of the 1960s during a time of bitterness and dissension and civil war in this country is very much tied into the assassination. And when you say it like that, you're true. And this is where he talks about Jim. Why did you pick Garrison as the focal point of JFK? Because in Jim, I found a worthy protagonist, a vehicle to include all the research that was done in the case. I respect Jim. He put himself out there and led with his chin. His was a flawed investigation, but he did his best. He was one of the very few who early on said that the government did it, which was an astounding statement in 1967, a very, very scary one. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree
It
more.
it was funny when I was watching this. There's a book I read by John F. Kennedy actually called Profiles in Courage, where he wrote about political and social leaders that he felt had taken massive personal risks to both their reputations and careers and lives, to do like the thing that was politically right or conscionable at the time. And I don't know, I found myself thinking of that book while I was watching this movie and thinking about Jim Garrison, I guess, like, or thinking about Garrison was, this was a man who sort of sacrificed his political career and reputation, everything, essentially. Although he managed to get reelected, and that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. But like, he really risked everything in order to tell what he, or at least expose what he thought was the truth,
And it gets even sadder because he's incredibly, incredibly ill during the time of this film being made and being released. I mean, it's bizarre. Like I had the recent experience of watching Remains of the Day, and they showed behind the scenes footage of Christopher Reeve like being interviewed whilst he's making the film, and he's like, "Oh yeah, no, it's a wonderful film." And then it cuts to like the next interview with Christopher Reeve, and he's fucking paraplegic. And it was the same here. Of like they interviewed him one time, and it was like, "I believe there is a conspiracy," and then it cuts to another interview, and he's fucking laid in bed on the drip, and he's gaunt, and he's like, I still believe. And there is that sort of thing of, I wish there was a little bit longer where he could have, seen this movie
the rest of his life.
Seen this movie become accepted as a nice, as a good thing. What we were talking about earlier, why did you put famous actors, Lemon, Matthau, Sutherland, John Candy, Ed Asner, into small roles? They help us along the road because the material might be in some sense dry and arcane to many people. Each actor has a little riddle or obstacle for Garrison, who has to work his way around it to move farther into the heart of the labyrinth. Very good. And then here was the quote I did earlier. Do you expect to see negative reaction to JFK? I think older white males will have a major problem with it. I think the younger generation will be more open. And this is where we come, to that idea of, the heavily liberal white guy of the 60s, 70s, who, again, now, all of these younger people, I'm sure, look at him as like, old man, what do you know about? Oh, yeah, I'm sure all the older white guys hate your movie. Yeah, yeah. Well, what do you actually think about, I'm sure. And it's the sad sort of, we become the establishment, whether we want to or not.
Well, every generation does. And I think, you're always building on what came before in a way. And the civil rights movement of the past, with the benefit of hindsight now, we can see certain flaws within it. It was largely church-based and therefore patriarchal a lot of the time, and didn't necessarily include women in, like positions of power in a lot of ways. Like there's there's always things that can be improved on and that the next generation builds towards, So I think, for the time that this was released, Oliver Stone was probably the only kind of person that could get something like this released, in a mainstream way and have it be, budgeted for and, backed by a major studio.
And I guess, and then here's like a legitimate change, which is this movie's depiction of gay people homophobic? And like, Peter Travers at the time for Rolling Stone referred to certain scenes as scarily homophobic. And then I've got this interview here, Stone being interviewed by Jeff Yarborough for The Advocate. So The Advocate is a gay publication, isn't it? Or am I completely?
I think so. I'm not sure. Couldn't say.
Am I completely? Because this is another thing of like, at the time, The Advocate is the world's leading source of LGBT news. Yeah. So at the time, Stone was circling, producing, and possibly going to direct a movie called The Mayor of Castro Street, which was going to be years before Sean Penn's film, Harvey Milk film.
Oh shit!
And so not only was the depiction of David Ferry and Clay Shaw and sort of Willie O'Keefe and these gay prostitutes under fire, but it was backed sort of and underpinned by, are we going to now let this guy make the Harvey Milk movie. And I don't, I personally don't think. Oh well, here we go. So last January, Stone was outraged by an article written by the Advocate's film critic in JFK, a new low for Hollywood. Aronstein, who wrote that article, David Aronstein, refutes JFK's theory that there was a gay cabal out to kill Kennedy. And so he's interviewed, Stone's interviewed. Again, something that I don't know if a lot of people...
I guess I didn't get the sense that the film was arguing there was a gay cabal.
Yeah.
I think, I thought it did a very good job of making the point, these guys happened to be gay, yes,
yeah.
And that was sort of why they had an in certain communities that were convenient for the wider conspiracy. But ultimately, they were used as tools and pawns by higher, shadowier powers.
It's right here.
I didn't get the sense that that's what they were doing.
We've got it here. How do you respond to the accusation that JFK portrays gays in a homophobic manner? The chief villains in the film are heterosexual. The finger is pointed at the power structure in Washington and its combination of CIA and military intelligence people who call the shots. Yeah. I never said Clay Shaw was the mastermind of this conspiracy by any means. He's a fringe player who knows something about what is going on. I hardly think David Ferry was a mastermind either. The villains lie in Washington, not in New Orleans. And then we get the rebuttal from Jeff Yarborough. But Shaw and Ferry are on screen a lot more than the Washingtonians. Do you understand that the gay community takes issue with this portrayal of homosexuals as deviants because of the dearth of images in films of gays who are not homicidal, psychotic, or both? Stone, the characters of Shaw and Ferry and the composite character of Willie O'Keefe were historically gay. You cannot be, at the same time, politically correct and a historical revisionist. They were gay and they were involved in this conspiracy. A lot of gay people objected to the scene in the film depicting those three in drag. Shaw is shown in JFK painted gold from head to toe and sniffing amyl nitrate. Is there a historical basis for that scene? Let me show you a picture. He calls to an assistant outside of his private office and requests that 2 photographs be brought to him. Here, there's Shaw, there's Ferry, both in wigs. The drag scene was important to the film because I had to make the point that Shaw was lying when he said he didn't know Ferry. He obviously knew him. The point of that scene was to prove that Shaw perjured himself. Many people said they knew each other. Where's the bit here? As for the drag scene, we're sitting here looking at Shaw and Ferry in these photographs in wigs. In terms of me showing Shaw painted gold, that came from an FBI document which said that Shaw was given to sadism and masochism in his homosexual activities, that he ran a gay club and presided over it with a whip in his hand, and that one year he painted himself gold at Mardi Gras. And so this, but this is the thing. He is kind of historically revisionist because there was no woman on his team. On Garrison's team, Laurie Metcalf is a complete creation, and he wanted a female descent and a female voice in that. And that's the thing,
being both politically correct and historically revisionist.
Yeah, so he balances himself out. And then we talk. I mean, obviously the movie never came to pass, but what is the other movie nominated for Best Picture this year, David? The Silence of the Lambs, where everybody is saying the exact same thing of, okay, great film, but the first major budget depiction of a trans person is a fucking serial killer.
It's a serial killer. Yeah.
This wasn't an era where there were these, huge gay movies with honest, happy depictions. They were either, but this is the thing. Demi, then his next film is Philadelphia, which people often point to as his reaction to Silence of the Lambs and the negative reaction of that. Stone never got to make the mayor of Castro Street. And so, and here's his thing now. A lot of people in the activist community are saying that you shouldn't direct the mayor of Castro Street. Some people in the queer nation go so far as to say that the film should not be directed by anyone unless that person is gay. It's wrong for them to say that if I wanted to, I shouldn't be able to direct the film because I'm straight. Will you direct the film? No, I'm going to drop out at this point. 2 reasons. The inescapable controversy that would result if I did direct it, and the fact that I've just finished a political movie involving an assassination, because obviously Harvey Milk was assassinated himself. And they're positing here that Robin Williams is going to star. And this is the sliding door of a 1993 Robin Williams as Harvey Milk directed by Oliver Stone movie. Sounds fucking incredible.
Yeah. Sounds incredible.
And then the interview just goes completely. I can't even. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Speaking of sex, this is Jeff Yarborough. So they've had a full conversation about like the need and the importance of honest depiction of gay people on screen. And then Jeff Yarborough says, "Speaking of sex, have you ever had a homosexual experience?" Oh God, can you please just write Oliver laughed? I can't tell you that. I'll be in deep shit. With whom? With the government. If I admit to that, then they'll really be on my ass. They're trying to nail me. Well, I guess I've already done everything wrong in my life, in their opinion. Then why would it matter? Maybe you're right. You won't deny having had a homosexual experience. I won't deny it. So you've had sex with men. I won't flatly deny that. I'd like you to answer about the details. You mean which sailors, which ports? We can start there. I mean, it's the most crazy book I've ever read in a while, and just goes back to an era of journalism. Can you even imagine if somebody
just
said
going
that?
absolutely nuts about the fact that this guy might have like had sex with a man at some point in his life? Jesus.
Oh, it's great stuff.
The 90s were wild.
The 90s were wild. I want to end on a note of sincerity. In that I genuinely think, I think Stone's a sincere individual. I think he made a very incendiary film. Like, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
But there is something to it, and it is a powerful film that still, stands the test of time. People still love it. People still talk about it.
It's a good one. It's great.
It's a beloved movie. Yeah, it's a beloved movie.
And I think, it's his passion for the subject matter and for the case itself, like, really shines through. I think, like, this is, I mean, it's a political work of art, and I mean, art is always political, but it's, it's not shy about making it plain that, like, this is a politically charged movie. We're here to, like, lay out some points of view. They don't demand that you agree or disagree, or like, you've got the appeal to, like, defend your country and liberties kind of there at the end of the closing remarks. But I mean, I think that's the closest this movie gets to, like, telling you what to do with this information, essentially. I think it's an incredibly well-made movie with a political point to make, and we could use more like them. Exactly.
And even if you watch this and go, all right, but I'll be honest, I still believe solo shooter, I think you can't leave this without an element of distrust. And, I believe that this is my big thing with, like, the release of the documents. I don't believe that they're hiding a document that literally says, David Whiting killed JFK. I think that in those documents is references to all the terrible shit they did with MLK and Malcolm X and all the other horrific shit that they were doing at the time. There is no document in the world that would ever exist
to incriminate the heads of all of this.
We go back to, it's right here. It's X. What does he say? No one has said he must die. There's been no vote, nothing on paper. It's as old as the crucifixion. A military firing squad, 5 bullets, 1 blank. No one's guilty. And, well, there you go. I mean, that's as good a summation as anything.
And I think it lends credence to the idea, like, well, how would all these people keep a secret? Well, most of them don't know that there's a secret that they're keeping. Or if they do know that they're keeping a secret, they don't know what else it relates to. And so therefore everyone has plausible deniability, and everyone, can't implicate anybody else even if they wanted to, or they can't implicate enough people to unravel the whole thing,
And it goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
And deeper.
And it goes nowhere. And that's the rabbit hole. That's the trick. That's the crux. And that is JFK.
Time to move forward.
And there we go. We end, and then the film ends with, what does it say? Past this prologue. We end with. Oh, here it is. Study the past. Past is prologue. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And the film opens with the quote from Ella Wheeler Wilcox: "To sin by silence while others doth protest makes cowards out of men." Say what you want about Stone, and people have, and people will forever. But he did not stay silent, and he used his incredible clout at the time of 2 Best Director wins for, again, Stone has always made fucking incendiary movies. It just so happens that more people agree that the fucking Vietnam War was terrible and we treat veterans terribly in the late 80s. And so he rode that wave of like political people agreeing with him, took all that clout, took 3 Oscars, Platoon wins Best Picture on the height of, God, Vietnam was terrible. And he takes all of that clout and all of that money and he makes this. And then what does he make next, back to back with it? Yeah, I like rock and roll music. I'll make a Doors movie.
And we love him for it.
And we love him for it. We love Oliver Stone. Wonderful stuff. Thank you very, very much, David.
Thank you, Tom.